National Electrical Code Section 410.4 addresses luminaires in wet locations, stipulating that these fixtures must be specifically approved for such environment. The core of the issue revolves around the interpretation of wet location versus damp location, particularly in the context of a bathroom without a shower. The inspector's argument likely stems from the potential for water exposure above the tub, even without a shower head, due to splashing or humidity from bathing. However, Section 100.2 of the NEC offers definitions that can be used to make the case that it is only a damp location. A wet location, according to Section 100.2, is characterized by locations where water is likely to drip or splash on a luminaire or equipment. Conversely, a damp location, as defined in the same section, refers to areas where moisture is likely to condense or can be present in the air in sufficient quantity to support corrosion or cause undue deterioration of equipment. In a bathroom lacking a shower, the primary concern is moisture from humidity and occasional splashing, rather than direct water spray. Given that the fixture is listed for damp locations, it aligns with the conditions typically found in such a bathroom. The NEC does not offer definitive clarity in situations such as these, leaving room for interpretation. The absence of a shower head eliminates the direct source of water spray that would unequivocally classify the area as a wet location. The inspector's interpretation hinges on the potential for splashing, and it is important to address this concern directly. It can be argued that normal bathing activities are unlikely to cause significant splashing on the luminaire, particularly if it is positioned a reasonable distance from the tub. The listing of the fixture for damp locations is crucial. It indicates that the fixture has been tested and found suitable for environments with elevated humidity levels, which is characteristic of bathrooms. The fact that it is not specifically listed for wet locations does not automatically disqualify it, as long as the conditions do not meet the definition of a wet location. It is recommended to engage in a constructive dialogue with the inspector. Present arguments clearly and respectfully, emphasizing the definitions in the NEC and the listing of the fixture. Explain why the specific bathroom conditions more closely resemble a damp location than a wet location. Be prepared to provide documentation supporting the fixture's listing for damp locations. If the inspector remains unconvinced, consider seeking a second opinion from another qualified electrical inspector or a code expert. Different inspectors may have varying interpretations, and a fresh perspective could be beneficial. If the inspector insists on a wet-rated fixture, explore alternative options that meet the requirement while still satisfying the aesthetic and functional needs of the bathroom. There are many luminaires available that are specifically designed for wet locations and can be installed in bathrooms without compromising safety or code compliance. When selecting luminaires for bathrooms, always prioritize safety and code compliance. Ensure that the fixtures are properly listed for the intended environment and that they are installed according to the manufacturer's instructions and the requirements of the NEC. In addition to the location rating, also consider the type of luminaire and its suitability for the intended use. For example, recessed luminaires should be IC rated if they are installed in insulated ceilings to prevent overheating. The NEC also includes requirements for ground fault circuit interrupter (GFCI) protection in bathrooms. Section 210.8 generally requires GFCI protection for receptacles in bathrooms, and depending on the specific circumstances, it may also be required for luminaires. Consult the NEC for the specific requirements in your jurisdiction. The key to resolving this red tag is to engage in a respectful and informed discussion with the inspector, presenting a clear and logical argument based on the definitions in the NEC and the listing of the fixture. If necessary, seek a second opinion or explore alternative fixture options to ensure compliance with the code while meeting the needs of the project. The determination of whether an area above a tub without a shower constitutes a wet location is a matter of interpretation that hinges on the likelihood of direct water exposure. While Section 410.4 of the National Electrical Code mandates the use of fixtures approved for wet locations in such environments, the code itself does not offer a definitive classification for this specific scenario. This ambiguity necessitates a careful evaluation of the actual conditions and a reasoned application of the code's definitions. Central to this evaluation is the distinction between wet and damp locations, as defined in Section 100.2 of the NEC. A wet location is characterized by the likelihood of water dripping or splashing on luminaires or equipment, implying a direct and substantial exposure to water. In contrast, a damp location is defined by the potential for moisture condensation or the presence of sufficient airborne moisture to cause corrosion or deterioration. The critical question, therefore, is whether the area above the tub is more likely to experience direct splashing or merely elevated humidity levels. In the absence of a shower, the primary source of water exposure is splashing during bathing. The extent of this splashing depends on various factors, including the depth of the tub, the bathing habits of the occupants, and the distance between the tub and the luminaire. If the tub is shallow, the occupants are generally careful, and the luminaire is positioned relatively far from the tub, the likelihood of significant splashing is considerably reduced. In such cases, it can be argued that the area more closely resembles a damp location than a wet location. The listing of the luminaire is another crucial factor to consider. If the luminaire is listed for damp locations, it indicates that it has been tested and found suitable for environments with elevated humidity levels. While this does not automatically qualify it for use in a wet location, it does provide evidence that it can withstand a certain degree of moisture exposure. The inspector's interpretation of the code is, of course, a significant factor in determining whether the installation is acceptable. Inspectors have the authority to enforce the code based on their understanding of its intent and application. However, their interpretation should be reasonable and consistent with the code's definitions and the specific conditions of the installation. If the inspector insists that the area above the tub constitutes a wet location, despite the absence of a shower and a damp location listing of the luminaire, it is important to engage in a constructive dialogue. Present the arguments clearly and respectfully, emphasizing the factors that mitigate the risk of direct water exposure. Be prepared to provide documentation supporting the luminaire's listing and any other relevant information. If the inspector remains unconvinced, consider seeking a second opinion from another qualified electrical inspector or a code expert. Different inspectors may have varying interpretations, and a fresh perspective could be beneficial. As a last resort, it may be necessary to appeal the inspector's decision to the local electrical authority. The appeals process typically involves submitting a written request outlining the reasons for the appeal and providing supporting documentation. The authority will then review the case and make a final determination. To avoid such disputes, it is always advisable to consult with the local electrical inspector before commencing any electrical work. This allows for a clear understanding of the code requirements and the inspector's expectations. It also provides an opportunity to address any potential concerns and to ensure that the installation is compliant from the outset. In addition to the wet versus damp location issue, there are other code requirements that may apply to luminaires installed above tubs. These include requirements for GFCI protection, minimum clearances from the tub, and the type of luminaire that is permitted. Consult the NEC for the specific requirements in your jurisdiction. Ultimately, the determination of whether an area above a tub without a shower constitutes a wet location is a judgment call that depends on a variety of factors. By carefully evaluating the conditions, understanding the code definitions, and engaging in a constructive dialogue with the inspector, it is possible to arrive at a solution that is both safe and compliant. In navigating the complexities of electrical code compliance, particularly concerning the installation of luminaires in bathrooms, a thorough understanding of the National Electrical Code, NEC definitions and specific requirements is paramount. The scenario involving an open bulb recess installed above a tub without a shower highlights the importance of correctly interpreting the distinction between wet and damp locations, as well as the implications for fixture selection and installation. The inspector's initial red tag, citing Section 410.4a, underscores the significance of adhering to the code's mandate that fixtures in wet locations must be specifically approved for such environments. However, the ambiguity lies in whether the area above a tub, absent a showerhead, truly qualifies as a wet location. Section 100.2 of the NEC provides crucial definitions that help clarify this distinction. A wet location is characterized by the likelihood of water dripping or splashing on luminaires or equipment, suggesting direct and significant water exposure. Conversely, a damp location is defined by the potential for moisture condensation or the presence of sufficient airborne moisture to cause corrosion or deterioration. The key to resolving this issue lies in assessing the specific conditions of the bathroom in question. Without a shower, the primary source of water exposure is splashing during bathing. The extent of this splashing is influenced by factors such as the tub's depth, the bathing habits of the occupants, and the distance between the tub and the luminaire. If the tub is shallow, the occupants are generally careful, and the luminaire is positioned a reasonable distance from the tub, the likelihood of substantial splashing is reduced. In such cases, it becomes more plausible to argue that the area resembles a damp location rather than a wet location. The fixtures listing plays a pivotal role in this determination. If the luminaire is listed for damp locations, it indicates that it has undergone testing and is deemed suitable for environments with elevated humidity levels. While a damp location listing does not automatically qualify a fixture for use in a wet location, it provides evidence that the fixture can withstand a certain degree of moisture exposure. This can strengthen the argument that the installation is acceptable provided that the conditions do not meet the criteria for a wet location. It is essential to engage in a constructive dialogue with the electrical inspector. Present your arguments clearly and respectfully, emphasizing the definitions in the NEC and the specific conditions of the bathroom. Explain why the area is more akin to a damp location than a wet location, and provide documentation supporting the fixtures listing for damp locations. If the inspector remains unconvinced, consider seeking a second opinion from another qualified electrical inspector or a code expert. Different inspectors may have varying interpretations, and a fresh perspective could be beneficial. Appealing the inspector's decision to the local electrical authority is also an option. The appeals process typically involves submitting a written request outlining the reasons for the appeal and providing supporting documentation. The authority will then review the case and make a final determination. To avoid such disputes, consulting with the local electrical inspector before commencing any electrical work is highly recommended. This allows for a clear understanding of the code requirements and the inspector's expectations, and it provides an opportunity to address any potential concerns and ensure that the installation is compliant from the outset. In addition to the wet versus damp location issue, other code requirements may apply to luminaires installed above tubs. These include requirements for GFCI protection, minimum clearances from the tub, and the type of luminaire that is permitted. Section 210.8 generally requires GFCI protection for receptacles in bathrooms, and depending on the specific circumstances, it may also be required for luminaires. Always consult the NEC and local amendments for the specific requirements in your jurisdiction. The NEC 314.27 egress over box is located in a wet location. The NEC 410.10d discusses luminaires located in a damp or wet location. In conclusion, determining whether an area above a tub without a shower constitutes a wet location requires careful consideration of the NEC definitions, the specific conditions of the bathroom, and the fixtures listing. By engaging in a respectful and informed discussion with the inspector, it is possible to arrive at a solution that is both safe and compliant. Electrical code is subject to interpretation, and it is very important to be on the same page as the authority having jurisdiction.